I will not step back. This is my child's right to be here.
You people never belong where the rules are written for others.
Rules are meant to protect, not to exclude.
It's procedure. Follow it, or face the consequences.
A quiet summer afternoon in the park tilts on a thin edge between the mother's steadiness and the uniform's power. What begins as routine supervision becomes a test of who belongs in public space, where procedure can either protect or push people out. Phones live like small candles. The usual laughter fades. A community decides to witness. From benches and blue railings to courtrooms and reform, this is a story of dignity held firm, truth recorded, and accountability finally named. Stay with us as the moment widens from one bench to an entire city, learning how justice sounds when spoken aloud. If this matters to you, share your thoughts, pass it to someone who needs it, and follow Human Spirit Stories for the next chapter. V Central Park in high summer looked like a painting someone had left out in the sun. The grass bright and warm, the ponds winking through the trees, the walks pulsing with prams and tourists and runners who knew every curve of the loop. Angela Brooks chose a bench that offered a clean view of the new playground bright blue rails, a climbing dome that caught the light, swings that creaked with cheerful stubbornness. She settled with the unhurried grace of a parent who had done this many times, set her tote by her feet, and watched as her daughter, Maya, darted toward the swings with the breathless joy of 8. A vendor pushed a cart near the path, the buttery scent of pretzels floating behind him. When Angela bought one, she tucked an extra $1 under the napkin on the cart's rim, a quiet tip and a thank you said without words. She greeted strangers the way New Yorkers learn to greet, with small nods that keep the world moving. "Afternoon," she said to the violinist at the corner of the lawn, a middle-aged man bringing Somewhere Over the Rainbow into the sunlight. She tucked a folded bill into his case and pointed toward the playground. The man smiled, as if to say the song would hold the afternoon in place for a while. Nothing in Angela's posture suggested hurry or fear, yet there was a studied neatness to the way she sat. Back to a tree, shoulder angled to keep the slide, the swings, and the northern path inside the same glance. Her phone, when she checked it, showed a screen without photographs or shopping lists. She skimmed a short string of work messages and then cleared the screen, the gesture so practiced it read like a reflex. Maya called, "Mama, look at me," and drove her legs like little pistons, rising higher, hair sweeping the air behind her. Angela's smile was genuine. So was the tension braided beneath it. The afternoon hummed the way a city hums. Stroller wheels on brick, the clink of plastic cups at a cart where lemonade and seltzer made a small, portable summer. Nearby, a couple from out of town debated a map. An older woman unfolded a picnic cloth as carefully as someone turning down a bed for a guest. None of them knew Angela. That was on purpose. Details reveal themselves in the quiet if one knows to watch. Angela's eyes kept returning to the path nearest the playground entrance, the one where patrol cars sometimes eased by as if they owned the lane. She took in the crowd the way an usher catalogs a theater. Who had arrived, who had left, where the families clustered, which group, black, Latino, white, stood a little farther from the shade. The unease in the air was not obvious, not to the jubilant, not to the distracted. But parents who frequent the same patch of park learn what the wind carries. And today, it carried a story that kept returning in murmurs. Some officers had taken to correcting families about where their children should play. Angela spoke with the vendor again when he looped back, thanked him for extra napkins, and asked how business had been lately. "Busy," he said, shrugging, "but people stay shorter. Some days they get looks." He did not say from whom. He did not have to. When the vendor moved on, Angela slipped her phone from her pocket and typed a short, neutral note, then locked the screen and laid the device face down on the bench. The city's choreography continued. A jogger stretched, balanced on one leg like a crane. A nanny coaxed a toddler down a slide with claps that sounded like little fireworks. The violinist took a water break and traded a joke with a uniformed parks worker. If you had stepped into the scene without history, you would have called it ordinary, even kind. Yet ordinariness changes when someone is made to feel out of place. Angela had seen that transformation before. It begins with a glance that lingers a fraction too long, with a question asked in a tone that is just polite enough to carry a threat without being named as one. She adjusted her seat to follow Maya's arc. "You're flying," she said, the words easy and warm, then quieter. "I see you." Her gaze returned to the path. A white sedan eased across the crosswalk. A cyclist clicked his brakes and raised a palm, the universal language of "it's all right." A child's laugh, thin as a bell, carried from the climbing dome. So did a small sob when someone misjudged a bar and scraped an elbow, the sort of mishap parents solve with wipes and reassurance and the magic of a bandage. 2 benches down, a retired schoolteacher's silver hair clipped close. Posture still, discipline folded his newspaper and looked over at the playground as if making sure Joy was being supervised properly. Next to him, a tourist read the map again, tilting it the other way as if a new angle might show a new route. Across the walkway, a pair of teenagers shared fries and leaned toward each other, the way young people do when they are building a private city of 2. Angela noticed them all, not because she was nosy, but because paying attention had always kept her child and other people's children a little safer. She allowed herself a moment to savor the pretzel's warmth, tore a piece, and passed it to a little boy whose grandmother asked with polite caution if that would be allowed. "Of course," Angela said. "There's plenty." The grandmother smiled in relief and pressed a hand to her heart, a gesture as old as comfort. The small exchange smoothed something in the air. Another few minutes. Angela called to Maya in a voice pitched to land gently rather than cut. "Then water." Maya nodded without protest. It was a routine they knew well. Pause and drink, breathe and enjoy, then resume the serious business of play. Angela filled the lid of the bottle like a cup the child's favorite way and set it on the bench, ready to be claimed. The violinist resumed and shifted to a hymn, soft and low, the melody threading through the trees. Angela took in the long lawn beyond the fence, the skyline's insistence that this was not wilderness, but a luxurious loan of space from the city's relentless geometry. She noted the time in her head, not on the screen, but by the angle of the light and the flow of the crowd. In late afternoon, families began to thin, naps to beckon, dinners to assemble themselves from takeout menus and tired ingenuity. A patrol car did pass, but not close. It idled at the end of the path and then crawled toward the transverse like a person who had changed their mind. Angela's shoulders eased a measure without showing it. The afternoon might stay kind. She knew better than to trust a single calm hour. Yet she allowed the hope to sit beside her like a polite companion. She waved to a couple she recognized from other Saturdays, a nurse still in clogs, a man in the mat's cap, and they waved back, that shorthand confession all city parents share: "We are tired, we are devoted, we are trying." "Watch me jump," Maya called, and Angela stood to catch the landing with her eyes, the only net a confident child wants. Maya stuck it and grinned, then ran back, breathless, to gulp water from the makeshift cup. "Tastes like a picnic," she said, and Angela laughed. Because it did. Because on a good day, even ordinary water can collect a little of the sweetness it passes. The sun slid lower, burnishing the bronze of the playground railings, softening the harsh edges of the day. A breeze moved in from the ponds and turned the leaves into a whispering audience. Angela's phone buzzed once against the bench slat no sound, only a small tremor. She glanced at the screen without lifting it. The message contained nothing about school forms or deliveries, nothing a passerby would find interesting. She let the screen go dark again. She noticed, not for the first time, how the crowd arranged itself in gentle patterns of familiarity. Grandparents at the shaded end, newcomers taking pictures near the sign, city kids claiming the center with the swagger of people who know where they belong. She thought of dinner, maybe a diner a few blocks south where the burgers came, wrapped in the paper of her own childhood, where the server called everyone Han and refilled coffee before you realized you wanted it. She considered too the small rituals that keep a day from tipping into worry, asking the server how their shift was going, leaving a tip that said, "I see your effort. I am grateful." When Angela sat again, an elderly man eased down at the far end of her bench. He smelled faintly of aftershave and rayon wool, the scent of wardrobes from another era. He watched the playground in companionable silence for a minute or two, then spoke without turning his head, his voice dry and not unkind, as if offering a warning he wished were unnecessary. "That cop isn't kind," he muttered. "You see," the warning from the elderly man lingered in Angela's mind, the way a low cloud lingers over a lake. She kept her eyes on Maya, who was learning the rhythms of the new playground. But some part of her attention returned again and again to the main approach, the route any patrol would take if it meant to be seen. The afternoon had slipped a shade cooler. A band of shade reached across the rubber flooring, and the laughter of children landed softly as if cushioned by the trees. The violinist was packing up, promising he would be back near sundown. Parents checked watches without numbers, the old habit of telling time by light and hunger. Angela folded the pretzel paper and slid it into a small trash bag she kept in her tote, the kind of courtesy that keeps a city from tripping over its own good fortune. Maya slowed on the swing, dragging the toes of her sneakers with the deliberate seriousness that children bring to small decisions. She jumped off, stuck the landing, and ran toward the climbing dome, where 3 new friends were testing the far side. Angela watched the way children form alliances without treaties, honoring rules that are as much instinct as instruction. She took a breath, let it out, and felt the bench cool under her palms. If this hour shared its quiet, she would take it. If it asked for steadiness, she would offer that too. At the far end of the path, a uniform appeared in the background, the way a word appears at the edge of hearing. Then another. The first man was tall and broad through the chest, the kind of build that filled the doorway and expected it to widen. The second, a woman, kept half a step back, her head turning as if to take in more than one thing at a time. Their steps were unhurried, but they were not wandering. They were moving with a purpose that takes the temperature out of an afternoon. The first man's hand rested on his belt in a way that suggested familiarity with being obeyed. The woman's hand hovered near her radio, not quite touching it, as if it were a thought she had not decided to speak. Angela's posture did not change. She remained as a mother remains when a child is testing courage. Attentive, easy to see, not easy to push. She could feel the subtle migration in the playground. Conversations shortened. A father shifted to stand a little nearer his daughter. A grandmother lifted her chin, as if to say, "I see you, and I remember my own rules." The park's soundtrack, a jogger's footfalls, a stroller's rattle, the distant hiss of a bus on Fifth Avenue continued, but a hush fell inside it, like the quiet between the conductor's raised hands and the first note. They came to a stop within a polite distance of the bench, and the man spoke with an accent that could have been any borough when it wanted to be official. "Afternoon." He left the word on the ground like a measuring stick. Angela answered with a nod and a calm, "Good afternoon," the tone New Yorkers use to keep a door open without inviting a stranger inside. The woman officer offered a small, almost apologetic smile, then schooled her features into the attentive blankness the job sometimes demanded. "Got a couple of calls about loitering," the man said, letting the word do the work of more than one meaning. "Folks feeling a little crowded today." He glanced around, not at the whole crowd, but at pieces of it, as if the park had been cut into categories. Angela kept her voice mild. "It is a busy weekend," she said, and gestured with one hand to the universe of the playground. "Families, tourists, you know how it is when the heat breaks a little." She did not ask him to define loitering. Not yet. Maya's laugh carried from the dome. She was negotiating a turn with a boy in a Yankees cap, both of them talking over each other in the fluent language of 8. Angela's eyes touched her daughter and returned, steady as a lighthouse beam. "Mind if I ask how long you've been here?" the man said. Angela's answer was simple and true. "Long enough for a snack and a swing," she said. "We'll be leaving before dinner." The man looked at the patch of ground beside the bench as if searching for evidence that might be coaxed into a story. His gaze slid to Angela's tote, to the water bottle lid, to the folded cardigan she kept for when the breeze took a chill. He found nothing that could be called out loud, and so he chose something he could imply. "Some folks feel more comfortable," he said, "when the area is being used the right way." The phrasing was careful in the way a dull knife is careful. It suggests caution while still cutting. Angela held his look. "The right way is posted officer," she said, glancing at the sign that spelled out rules about age ranges for certain structures, hours of use, and the ordinary commandments of courtesy. We're well within it. The woman officer shifted her weight, the movement slight but human. Ma'am, she said, we've had concerns, that's all. Her voice pressed the word concerns as if it might bruise, then let it go. A trio of teenagers drifted past with sodas clacking in a paper tray, the straws bobbing like small flagpoles. One of them glanced at the uniforms, then away, a practiced indifference that was older than his years. A nanny pushed a toddler toward the sandbox with a bright, open smile that said, "This is a normal day. We can all keep it that way." The man officer's attention returned to Angela. "You live in the neighborhood?" He asked the question conversational in sound and administrative intent. "Close enough to know where the shade is at this hour," Angela said, letting the warmth in her voice take the sharpness out of the exchange without surrendering any ground. Maya came racing over for water, cheeks flushed, hair already ringed with sweat. "Sip and breathe," Angela said lightly, setting the little improvised cup in the child's hand. Maya drank, sighed, and bounced on her toes. "Back in a minute," she announced. "The promise a child makes to the world when it believes the world will wait." She ran back toward the dome with that earthly faith. The man officer watched her go, then looked past her to where three boys had started a quiet game of tag on the grass beyond the fence. His gaze returned to Angela with a faint narrowing, as if he were trying to find the place where she had misfiled herself. "I'm going to ask you to wrap it up," he said, not loudly, but with a tone that suggested the question had already been answered. "We want to make sure everyone feels like they belong here." The sentence balanced itself on the fulcrum of paradox. Angela let a beat pass. "We do belong here," she said, "like everyone else." Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. The woman officer's mouth tilted. Not quite a frown, not quite a wince. She opened her palm the way people do when they mean to slow the tempo. "Brian," she said quietly, and the first man's name landed in the scene like a private thing dropped into public. He did not look at her. He shifted his stance to reclaim the moment, then turned his face toward the nearest families, the way a stage actor plays to the audience. "We've also got some behavioral issues reported," he said. "Kids getting a little too wild around the little ones." He let the phrase "little ones" hang in the air where the youngest parents could hear it and feel protective. A mother with a stroller glanced up, uncertain. Angela followed his gaze, then brought it back. "If there's a concern about my child's behavior," she said, "you can be clear and specific, and I will address it." She folded her hands on her knees, a gesture that was both gentle and immovable. A father in a Mets cap shifted closer to his daughter. Mrs. Carter, the shopkeeper who sometimes passed through on her way home, slowed near the fence with her phone in her hand, not raised, just there. Angela did not look at the phone, but she took comfort from the sight of it, the way a person takes comfort from a porch light, knowing someone else is awake. The man officer let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "No need to get technical," he said. "It's just easier for everyone if we don't have misunderstandings." He looked back to the woman officer as if inviting agreement, but she focused on the playground sign as if it were an exam she meant to pass. "Ma'am," she said to Angela, "maybe you could try the field by the carousel? It's quieter." The carousel was not closed. It was a suggestion dressed as kindness that would, in practice, remove the family from the center to the margin. Angela lifted her chin a fraction. "We'll finish our time here," she said. "Then we have plans." The man officer's jaw flexed, a tale more vivid than anger. There was a noise behind them, a short burst of laughter as a teenager faked a stumble and righted himself, and the sound sharpened his edge. He stepped half a pace closer, close enough that Angela could smell the starch of his shirt. "Look," he said, "I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not happening on my watch. Pack it up." The words were quiet, but they were not a request. He had the air of someone used to the world, stepping aside. Angela held the line of eye contact that refuses to be made small. "Officer," she said, and let the courtesy land before the rest, "you have not named the rule we are violating. You have not cited a complaint that applies to us. We are here as any family is here." She did not add, "We belong because we are citizens, because we are human, because this is public space." She kept her tone even. The woman officer's gaze skittered to Maya, then to the cluster of children on the dome. then to the parents whose attention had arrived and would not retreat. Something in her stance softened and then braced again, an inward tug of war visible only to someone looking closely. "Brian," she said once more, under her breath, and he cut her off with a tilt of the head, the sign a certain kind of partner uses to close a door. He turned his mouth into what might look like a smile if you did not listen for the words that came through it. He looked at Maya and the other children, at the natural democracy of a playground, and pitched his voice so that it would carry without being loud, so that it would sound like advice while functioning as a boundary. Keller curled a smile. Kids should stick with the right kind of friends. Maya heard it, her face tightening. The quiet that followed the officer's parting sentence was not empty. It was packed with all the things people were deciding not to say. Angela sat very still on the bench, as if stillness could keep the moment from tipping. She saw Maya's face tighten at the edges, the way a child's face learns to hide questions it should not have to ask. She felt a small tremor ripple through the playground, the sort of tremor made of glances and half-steps, and the rustle of phones leaving pockets and bags. A father angled himself between his daughter and the uniforms without making a show of it. The violinist's case, half closed, clicked shut with a soft apology, and he drifted farther up the path, conscience pulling his feet. The man in uniform took the hush as permission. He turned back to Angela with the thin smile of someone accustomed to manufacturing compliance. "Let's not make this complicated," he said, each word placed with the deliberation of traffic cones. "We can keep it easy if you pack your things and head out." The tone was gentle in the way a shove can be gentle if it is padded with manners. Angela folded the napkin in her hand once, then again, and set it atop the tote as if she were settling a piece of the afternoon where it belonged. "We will finish our time here," she answered, warm but firm, a voice meant to calm a skittish hour. Maya jogged over with a child's bounce that had lost a little altitude. "Water?" she asked, as if the ritual itself could steady the scene. Angela poured a small capful, the way Maya liked it, and smoothed the curl from her forehead. "Back you go," she said, keeping her own fear out of reach, where it could do no harm. Maya nodded and ran, and that running felt like a small blessing carried across the rubber tiles. "Ma'am," the woman officer said, the word careful and sincere at once, "we've had concerns raised about appropriate supervision and comfort levels." She seemed to taste each term before using it, as if worried it might come out sharp. Angela met her eyes, saw there the outline of a person who knew the weight of a choice and could not yet lift it. "Officer," Angela replied, "you are welcome to be specific. If there is a rule posted here that we are not following, you can name it and I will correct it." The woman's gaze flicked to the sign and back, then down to the radio at her shoulder, then up to the man beside her, as if each glance were a vote cast and immediately counted. The man exhaled in a sound that wanted to be a laugh. "Specific?" he echoed. "All right. We've had reports that certain families are taking over the equipment in a way that makes other people think twice about sticking around. When folks feel pushed out, we pay attention." He let the words "certain families" float over the space where they would land without making a sound. Angela listened to the construction of his sentence the way a mechanic listens for the hidden knock in an engine. "Pay attention is admirable," she said. "Applying it the same way to everyone is better." A mother near the sandbox lifted her phone chest high. She did not point it like a finger. She held it the way a person holds a candle, flame cupped against the wind. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Carter, the one who sometimes passed through with a bag of paper goods and a kindness tucked into the corner of her mouth, slowed at the fence and glanced, once, at Angela, which was all the permission she needed to keep the camera open. A jogger paused for a stretch that happened to face the bench, one heel on the edge of the planter, hamstring a line of practiced intent. He did not stare, he simply stayed. The man officer took a half step closer, close enough that his shadow met the bench. "You know," he said, conversational as a neighbor leaning over a hedge, "we call child protective services when we see red flags. We do not want to do that. But if we think a child is in an environment that is not appropriate, we do not have the luxury of waiting." He spoke the agency name the way a storm front speaks thunder in the distance, all suggestion, the threat built into the weather. Angela did not let the sentence settle. "You would be making a false report," she said evenly. if you based it on anything that is not in evidence. My daughter is safe, supervised, and playing within the posted rules. She felt the sting of the fear he meant to plant and held it where it could not root. Lady, he said, letting the courtesy lose a letter on the way out, look around. His hand swept the playground as if he were a host and she a guest on the wrong evening. Real parents do not make scenes. The phrase was not shouted. It was tossed lightly, as if lightness could smuggle it past the part of a person that recognizes an insult. The scene, Angela answered, is not ours. She kept her tone quiet and square, the voice of someone placing a picture back on its hook. The woman officer tried again, voice low and almost conspiratorial, as if kindness could be a treaty signed in the open. Maybe the field, she said, as though inviting Angela into a confidence that would rescue them both. It is cooler there. Fewer people, less attention. Her eyes telegraphed apology. Her body said she was standing where she had been told to stand. Angela softened her mouth in something like a smile that refused to surrender. We are nearly done, she said. My daughter has a few more turns, and then we will be on our way. Thank you for your concern. The thank you was genuine and unyielding. A bridge that did not move an inch. The man officer's amusement thinned. He turned his head a little, as if to check who else might be watching, and found more eyes than he had anticipated. He did not retreat. He chose instead the economy of cruelty that fits into small words. I do not have time for this, he said. Pack up your little criminal and move along. The word little tried to work as a lid on the rest. It did not fit. Several parents drew breath at once, a shared intake like the sea pulling back before a break. A child on the climbing dome stopped mid-reach and clung where she was, decision postponed by the temperature of the air. Angela kept her voice where the children could not mistake it for fear. Officer, she said, you are out of line. It was not a performance. It was a statement of calibration. You will lower your voice and speak to me with respect, or you will step back and allow my child to finish playing. She did not add the end. Those are your only options that lived at the end of a sentence. She did not need to. The man's face changed, as if a mask had been lifted a fraction. He leaned in, the way a person leans toward a flame to make sure it is caught. You people, he murmured, just loud enough. Forget your place when you have an audience. He looked at the phones then, at the lenses that were not lenses but eyes set to remember. He laughed without humor. You think anyone cares? He asked the air. Report whatever you want. I will still be right here tomorrow. He enjoyed the word tomorrow, made it sound like a promise and a dare. Maya drifted back again, drawn by the odd gravity that attaches children to the edges of adult storms. She reached for Angela's hand and held two of her mother's fingers, a small anchor that tried to keep a larger ship steady. Sweetheart, Angela said, her voice so soft it barely moved. You can take 2 more turns, then water, then we go for dinner. The plan, spoken aloud, laid a little track through the moment, a way forward that did not depend on the weather. Maya nodded and stayed where she was, choosing her mother over momentum for now. Last chance, the man said. He wanted the phrase to sound routine, like a form letter the world recognizes. He took the final half step that put him inside the boundary people carry around their bodies. It was not the step of a protector approaching to assist. It was the step of a challenger claiming ground. Angela's shoulders were square, her head level, her breath a measured thing. Back up, she said. You are too close. He smiled again, and the smile was not a smile at all. Or what? He asked. And in the 2 words, there was the full logic of a person who believes consequences do not apply. The slap, when it came, arrived with the suddenness of a dropped plate. His hand moved in a small arc that did not look like rage, only decision. And the sound of palm on cheek cracked across the playground the way a branch cracks in frost. Everything in the immediate world startled. Birds rose from the nearest tree. The stroller's wheels stopped. The hush became a vacuum. Angela's head turned with a force, and a hot bloom flashed under her skin, sharp and bright. She did not reach for the pain. She breathed, counted the breath without numbers, and lifted her face back to level as if an invisible string had drawn it there. Mom! Maya cried, the single syllable a wail and a question. Angela took Maya's hand and folded it into both of hers, eyes never leaving the man before her. The woman officers, "Brian!" tore out of her with a sound that had not learned how to be official. She stepped forward, a reflex of decency late to the scene, and stalled as if invisible hands had pressed on her shoulders. The phones, which had hovered, now rose without shame. The jogger straightened from his stretch and did not move away. Mrs. Carter's camera found its focus and held it steady as a pulse. Angela cataloged the world as if she were placing it into a cabinet where it would never be lost. The sky had turned the precise color it turns when the day is deciding not to storm after all. The rubber tiles underfoot smelled faintly of warm rain, though there had been none. A boy on the grass beyond the fence called to his friend and then did not call again, throat closed by the sight. Angela heard all of it and let none of it enter her posture. She turned a moment, not with force, but with clarity, so that it faced the light where everyone could see it. She did not lift a hand to her cheek. She did not step back. She did not match his volume or his heat. Her voice, when she spoke, carried like a bell rung to call witnesses, low and certain and meant to be heard by anyone within a life's distance. Officer Brian Keller, badge number 3712, NYPD. The sound of the slap still lived in the air long after the echo had thinned, traveling with Angela and Maya as they left the playground and crossed the park toward a small diner that had been on the corner longer than most of the buildings around it. The neon sign buzzed like a friendly insect. The door chimed with that old bell that announces arrivals without judgment. Inside, the room held the kind of comfort New Yorkers trust on hard days. Vinyl booths that remembered 1,000 conversations, a counter where the regulars were greeted by name, a waitress who called strangers dear and refilled coffee without asking if the cup needed it. Angela and Maya slid into a booth near the television mounted above the pie case. The television was muted, the captions crawled across the bottom in white blocks, and a live banner glowed red, announcing breaking news the way a theater sign announces a show that will not sell out. Maya's hands were still a little shaky, like wings after a hard gust. Angela kept one palm over the back of her daughter's fingers, a quiet blanket. The waitress arrived with a glass of water and a menu that had not changed in years. "Rough afternoon?" she asked softly, reading the softness in Maya's face rather than the bruise rising on Angela's cheek. "Burgers help," she added, offering a small, wry smile. Angela ordered two, one plain with ketchup on the side, one with lettuce and tomato, and a slice of American cheese. She added fries to share and asked for a milkshake the color of summer. "Chocolate?" the waitress suggested. "Chocolate," Angela agreed. When the waitress walked away, Angela slid $2 under the sugar caddy in a quiet promise of thanks yet to come. The television's pictures changed. A park, blue railings shining in late light. The caption, "Disturbing incident in Central Park playground." Someone in the diner whistled between their teeth and then apologized to the room for the sound. The waitress reached for the remote and lifted the volume from silent to a careful murmur that did not push the room around. The anchor's voice was measured in a way that meant, "Keep listening." The screen cut to the first video, shot from the line of benches that faced the swings. The lens wobbled a little, then steadied, and the patio of rubber tiles became a stage on which everything could be seen. The officer's hand rose and fell in a motion that, without context, might have looked like a gesture. With context, it was what it was. The slap landed again, but this time without sound. Since the diner's volume remained low, the absence of sound only amplified the sight. Someone near the counter said, "Oh no," in the voice people use when a stranger's misfortune has crossed the line into their own concern. Maya stared at the screen as if watching weather approach. Angela touched her daughter's shoulder and shook her head once. "Eyes on me," she said softly. And Maya obeyed, breathing in through her nose and out through her mouth, the way her school counselor had taught the children to steady themselves. "We are here," Angela said. "We are together." The television kept showing the park. Angela kept showing her child a face that did not look away. The anchor's words clarified inside the captions. Witnesses provided multiple recordings. A second angle filled the screen, this one from the edge of the climbing dome. The shot was lower, the way a camera is lower when a parent kneels to set it to record, and the moment became both more intimate and more public. The officer leaned in, the mother did not retreat, and the arc of the hand completed itself again in slow motion that removed any argument about ambiguity. A dishwasher clanged in the back and then hushed. Even the kitchen held still to be fair to the moment. Mrs. Carter appeared at the door with a paper bag and the kind of purposeful step people use when they're walking toward truth. She saw Angela and Maya and came to the booth without asking if she was intruding. "May I sit a second?" she asked, already halfway into the seat. She set the bag down and took out napkins and a small bottle of water. Mother code for, "I cannot fix this, but I can address one practical thing at a time." "I saw it," she said, her voice pitched low so it would not bounce off the chrome. "I am so sorry." Angela nodded once. The waitress reached across to top off Angela's glass and left a little plate with lemon slices, the ritual of care taking its ordinary shapes. The anchor introduced a third angle, and the banner at the bottom of the screen shifted to show words like pattern and eyewitness and accountability. The third video came from farther back, a wide shot that captured the whole geometry of the playground children, freezing in place, phones rising in hands like candles in a vigil, the woman officer taking half a step and then stopping, her face a tangle of duty and doubt. The camera's distance did not make the moment less clear. It made it more official. A structure, the state, the badge, the uniform, had entered a child's afternoon and made a choice that could not be defended by shadows. In the booth behind them, a couple debated in low tones, the way long married people debate, with care and with history. "It is right there," the man murmured. "There's nothing to argue." The woman wiped her eyes and said, "I brought our daughter to that playground when she was small." She did not need to finish the sentence. The room finished it for her. Angela's phone hummed against the leather, a small animal asking to be recognized. She turned it over and read a new message from an unknown number that said, "With a false sweetness, remember your place." She took a screenshot and filed it under the name she gave such moments, Noise. She muted the number and set the phone down again. She looked at Maya, and their eyes met like hands meeting in the dark. The waitress arrived with a milkshake. The straw stood straight as a flagpole. "On the house?" the waitress said, setting it down as if laying a palm gently on a fevered brow. Angela met her gaze and answered, "Thank you." The broadcast cut to the anchor desk. Behind the anchor, a still from the video became a poster-sized truth. The words below it said the department was aware of the footage and will be conducting an internal review. The anchor added, carefully, that previous complaints had been filed in other incidents, that some residents had voiced concerns about patterns of behavior, that a council member had requested further inquiry. On the counter, a man in a delivery jacket tapped his phone with his thumb and said, "Not to anyone in particular. Dairy Island, all of it." "Mr." Johnson stepped into the diner with a 10-year-old boy who kept glancing at Maya as if asking whether it was all right to smile at a friend on a bad day. "Mr." Johnson lifted two fingers in a greeting that was half salute, half prayer. "We saw," he said to Angela. "We are with you." He slid a small paper bag across the table. "I brought extra napkins," he said, as if napkins were the currency of solidarity. Angela smiled with the gratitude that knows when the right words are the simplest ones. "Thank you," she said again. He left the bag there like an offering and moved to the counter to order 2 grilled cheeses, the food childhood trusts. Maya leaned against Angela's shoulder and sipped the milkshake carefully in slow draws, as if it were a task she meant to perform with honor. "It is thick," she said, and the waitress, hearing it, laughed softly. "The way a milkshake should be," the waitress said. "The way a mother sounds when blessing a moment that has nothing to do with the larger fight and everything to do with surviving it." The reporter on screen changed to a live shot of the playground gate where a small collection of news vans had already gathered, antennae tilted like questions waiting for answers. A young journalist spoke into a wind that wanted to still have her words. She named the location and the time with the deliberate clarity of someone who understood the night would replay her sentences. She said witnesses described the strike as unprovoked. She said the videos appeared to confirm their accounts. She said the officer's name had not been officially released, though some on social media had begun to identify him. The camera panned to parents who spoke behind blurred boxes and softened voices, because not everyone wants to be recognized by people who would prefer them quiet. One mother said, "We left the park early last week because of how we were looked at." A grandfather said, "We do not want trouble. We want a place to sit and watch our grandchildren play." A teenage boy, voice altered to protect him and to mark him as already at risk, said, "We know when we are being told to move along without being told." The burgers arrived, glossy and perfect in their simplicity, and the fries steamed like a field waking in morning light. Angela cut the plain burger in halves for Maya and set the plate where small hands could reach without knocking over the glass. She ate slowly, not because she was not hungry, but because she had taught herself to eat in the way that kept her ready to stand. She asked the waitress about her shift, and the waitress rolled her eyes in a friendly way that said, "It is long and it is fine." Angela slid cash into the check holder before the check arrived, folded with a slight tilt that tells the server, "I saw the extra labor." The broadcast pivoted to a segment about community response. The words scrolled. A local pastor had called for calm and for vigilance in equal measure. A neighborhood association had scheduled a meeting for later in the week. A civil rights group had offered a hotline number for witnesses to share footage in one place. The anchor repeated the phone number slowly and twice, the way you do when you want a number to stick in a listener's ear. In the diner, people nodded, as if committing it to memory even if they would never call. The waitress, who had been refilling a cup at the far booth, returned to the counter and wrote the number in pen on a bar napkin and taped it to the pie case next to the slices of blueberry and coconut cream. Maya asked, "Are we in trouble?" Angela shook her head, the answer simple and firm. "We are not," she said. "Someone else island." She did not explain further yet. She let the milkshake and the burger be part of the lesson. Ordinary good things remain possible. Then the anchor announced that the station had verified a third recording from a fixed camera mounted at the park, and the video returned, wider than before, bureaucratically steady. The camera did not take sides. It did not flinch. It saw what it saw. In the diner, a murmur moved like a small weather system. A busboy crossed himself, not from habit but from a particular belief that moments deserve their rituals. The room's talk rose a little, the way talk rises when people know where they stand. There were no raised voices, only phrases like, "This is evidence," and "That could be me," and "It is past time." The waitress placed a to-go cup with a lid on the table. "Decaf for later," she said. "It is on me." Angela thanked her and watched the woman move away with the practiced balance of someone carrying too much and making it look like a dance. Angela's phone hummed again, a short message from a friend she had not seen in months. "I saw the footage. Do you need company?" Angela sent back a heart made of words instead of symbols. "Thank you for thinking of us. We are safe right now." Outside, a siren sang past, not stopping, the city's endless braid of emergencies weaving one more strand. The door chimed and then chimed again as people came in for dinner and left with curtains stapled shut. A table of teenagers put a hand-lettered sign on the counter that said, in neat marker, "We stand with you," and the waitress propped it up between the pies where everyone could see the handwriting. If anyone in the room disagreed, they disagreed quietly and with the kind of restraint that looks like silence. The news looped back to the top of the story. The anchor repeated that the department had promised a full review. The word "promised" sat there as if the air were considering it. A legal analyst appeared, and in that measured tone the profession uses when facts must be dressed for court, explained that multiple recordings from separate sources carry particular weight, that consistency among angles narrows the lane for doubt, that an internal review is not the end of the road when there is probable cause for more. Angela finished her burger, blotted her lips, and glanced at Maya, who had nearly conquered her half. "You did well," she said. "You are doing well." Maya nodded as if receiving an assignment, and the steadiness in the nod was a note held on pitch. The waitress set the check down with a pen and a slip of paper where she had written her name in a loop and a flourish. Angela added cash that named her gratitude with a little extra, the way people do when they want to bless a place for letting them be human. She gathered the tote, tucked the to-go cup inside, and stood. As the door chimed again and the bell offered its gentle benediction, the anchor shifted to a new topic that was not new at all. Another story of a place where belonging was rationed. The room thinned and filled, and thinned in the pulse of early evening. Angela held the door for Mrs. Carter and Mr. Johnson, and they walked out together into a city that had decided to watch. On the sidewalk, the light had slid toward gold. A breeze off the park made the flags on the museum steps across the street lift and bow like patient ushers. Angela paused where the building cast a stripe of shade. She took out her phone, opened the familiar secure app whose icon hid in plain sight, and let her thumb find the letters it knew without looking. She did not hurry. She did not look over her shoulder. She thought of the 3 recordings, of the room that had decided to believe what it saw, of the child at her side holding a milkshake cup like a trophy from a difficult day. Then she typed the only message the moment could carry and pressed send. Cover blown. Request immediate contact. Morning arrived with a soft resolve of a city that had decided to keep going. Light washed the glass of the federal building in lower Manhattan, and Angela stepped through the revolving door with a gait that looked like calm from the outside and accuracy from within. The lobby smelled faintly of paper and coffee. Security greeted her by habit, not by name, and the elevator carried her upward with a kind of hush that lets a person assemble their thoughts in the space between floors. The message she had sent the previous night cover blown, request immediate contact sat in her mind the way a key sits in a palm. Small, absolute, ready. The conference room was brighter than most rooms where hard things are discussed. Fluorescent light hummed without being cruel about it. A whiteboard ran the length of one wall, crowded with dates and initials, lines of connection drawn in blue and green. Files lay on the table in deliberate stacks, each one a quiet biography of a moment when someone was not treated as they should have been. A photo of the playground, those blue rails shining under late sun, was clipped to a folder at the far end, the way a teacher clips a child's drawing to a classroom wall to remember what learning looks like. Deputy Director Sarah Mitchell stood at the head of the table, jacket off, sleeves cuffed, hair pulled back with the efficiency of a person who has outrun excuses. She did not waste greetings. She measured Angela with a glance that managed to be both clinical and kind. "Sit," she said, and the word contained a welcome and an order in equal parts. Around the table waited 2 federal prosecutors, a case agent with a scar that made him look permanently interested, and a paralegal whose legal pads bore the neat script of someone who respects verbs. Angela took a seat and set her tote by her feet, the same way she had set it by the bench in the park. But now the gesture meant something else. She placed her phone face down beside her notebook, then looked up and let the room see that she was present, unfragmented, and ready to account for what she had seen and done. Mitchell began in a voice made for making complicated things understandable. "We have 3 videos from 3 separate sources," she said, tapping the folder with 2 fingers. 2 civilian recordings and 1 fixed camera from the park system. "We have written statements from 4 witnesses who identify the same primary actor and describe the same sequence of events in similar terms. We have your message. We have the city desk already using the word pattern." She lifted her gaze to catch Angela's directly. "And we have a child who deserves to see what justice looks like when adults do their job." The first prosecutor, a woman with eyes that did not blink more than necessary, uncapped the pen. "Let us begin with your timeline," she said. "From the start of the assignment to last evening." Her tone was neutral in a way that could swallow a storm. Angela nodded once, as if saluting the request, and began. 3 weeks observing the site, she said. Weekdays late afternoon, weekends mid-afternoon to early evening. I alternated positions. Playground bench with direct line of sight to the swings, path near the southern entrance, shaded bench by the dome. I noted officer presence on 8 separate days. On 4 of those days, the same male officer approached families of color and initiated contact without a posted rule violation to cite. Language included suggestions to relocate to the field by the carousel, which is not part of the designated playground area, and statements about comfort and appropriate use. 2 interactions included reference to Child Protective Services without cause. Yesterday's contact escalated in a way that was not provoked by any behavior from me or my child. She spoke the account like a rope she had coiled precisely, unspooling exactly as much as was needed. The case agent leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands folded in a shape that meant, "I'm paying attention." "How did he pick families?" he asked. Angela turned her palms upward, then lowered them again, a gesture that borrowed a second to make sure the words arrived clean. "He scanned the playground the way people scan for someone they already dislike," she said. "Not at random." He lingered until a parent looked up. Then he approached with a tone that let him pretend he was being helpful while insisting that we did not belong at the center. She did not add the words for what that is called. The room already knew. The paralegal slid a printout across the table, a transcription of the words the camera had caught, time-coded in careful blocks. The second prosecutor tapped the line where the threat had been made, "CPS will be called," and circled it lightly with his pen. "We will want corroboration of prior similar threats," he said, "ideally with dates and times." He looked to the agent, who nodded and lifted the folder. "We have 3 anonymous complaints from last summer and fall," the agent said. 2 parents declined to put names on paper out of fear. 1 gave initials. "We will try again today with the footage public." He did not yet say the words pattern and practice, but the room could hear them waiting in the hall. Mitchell let the legal talk breathe, then called it back to the center. "The strike," she said. "We all saw it." "Angela, describe the moment as you experienced it." The request did not ask for pain as content. It asked for fact as light. Angela sat taller by a small degree and kept her voice even. Because evenness is a form of respect when people are listening with their whole selves. "He stepped inside the boundary," she said. "I told him to back up. He asked, 'Or what?' and completed the movement. The sound carried. I did not respond physically. I identified him by name and batch number. I anchored my child and held the line." She paused. The woman officer attempted to intercede verbally, twice. He overruled her both times. The first prosecutor's pen rolled a single word over Roldan a square hand. Mitchell rubbed her thumb along the edge of the whiteboard tray, a small rhythm that sounded like thinking. Then her voice shifted into the register where a decision announces itself. "The strike was not just an assault," she said. "It was an assault on a federal agent in the course of a documented investigation." She did not open the floor for debate. The legal analyst in the paralegal's posture relaxed a fraction, the relief of a truth named aloud. The room took on the hum that rooms take on when a plan lifts off its drafting table. The prosecutors began to speak in paired terms: probable cause and corroboration, video evidence and chain of custody, internal review and independent inquiry. The agent listed next steps with nouns that sounded like action. Pull personnel files, request body camera logs, interview the partner, canvass the other Saturdays. The paralegal wrote hotline on the legal pad and slid a printed number onto the table that matched the one taped to a pie case miles away. Mitchell let the current run and then raised a hand, palm down, to slow the pace an inch. She looked at Angela as if preparing to hang a medal and the burden on the same ribbon. The room quieted around the motion, the way polite rooms do when something ceremonial is about to be spoken. "Angela," she said, the name making the air straighten. "From today forward, you are not only the investigator of record, you are also the subject victim for the relevant count." She did not raise her voice, but the sentence had the weight of a gavel. She continued, framing the law so it would stand where a child could see it. "The statute fits. The evidence is clear. Your composure under pressure and your immediate identification of the officer are assets to the case. You will be protected accordingly. We proceed." Angela heard the words as both assignment and acknowledgement. Her heart did not race. It steadied, as if the floor had settled back underfoot after a brief sway. She thought of Maya's small hand gripping 2 of her fingers like an anchor. She thought of the phones lifting, the hush that had turned into witness. She thought of the diner, of a milkshake standing straight in its glass, of a waitress who gave care the shape of a straw and a to-go cup. She let those pictures stand beside the law so the day would not be only one kind of truth. The first prosecutor cleared her throat. "We will need an updated statement today," she said. "We will schedule a medical evaluation to document the injury. We will coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office on charging language. We will also, as a practical matter, prepare for character attacks, because that is what happens." She said it without drama. as if reading the weather. "We will be ready," Angela said. Her tone contained no bravado, only the reliability of a person who keeps her promises. Mitchell looked to the agent. "Partner," she said. The agent nodded. "Elena Martinez," he replied. 4 years on patrol. Prior record clean. Training file suggests she has done well by the public. Her posture yesterday says she knows what line was crossed. We will bring her in. He glanced at Angela. If she steps across, we move faster. A knock rapped the conference room door with the polite urgency of someone who understands importance but not timing. An aide leaned in. "Ma'am," she said to Mitchell, "Public Affairs wants a line they can release beyond the standard acknowledgement." Mitchell shook her head once. "No commentary," she said. "We do our work on paper and in court. The footage does our speaking." The aide nodded and closed the door. They moved through next steps with the briskness of a team that has done this before and has not grown tired of doing it right. A timeline was built from verbs: interview, subpoena, request, prepare. The whiteboard acquired a column headed with the word evidence and another with the word witnesses. Under evidence, someone wrote 3 videos and underlined it. Under witnesses, someone wrote Mrs. Carter and Mr. Johnson and left space for more names, as if the board itself expected the community to widen. When the essentials had been settled, Mitchell's face softened by a degree that would not have been visible to anyone who did not know how to read kindness at low volume. "Take a moment, if you need it," she said to Angela. "Then let us get you to medical and to the recorder." Angela nodded and stood, and the room stood by instinct, a human ritual that is older than protocol. She gathered her tote and placed the strap on her shoulder with the same precision she used to place facts in order. In the corridor, the light looked the way morning looks when it has been asked to do more than brighten a city. Angela paused at a window and let herself breathe 3 measured breaths, as if taking the measure of the day. Her phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number that carried no poison this time. Only this: "We saw. We are with you." She did not ask who we was. She typed "thank you" in full words and slid the phone back into its place. Down the hall, a door opened to an interview room where the recorder sat ready, red light off, waiting for the official beginning. Angela walked that way, then turned, just for a beat, to look at the conference room door she had left. She remembered the park, the hush, the way the world had chosen to see. She remembered the milkshake straight straw and the pie case with a number taped to it, sunlight making the plastic shine. She lifted her chin, not for defiance but for alignment, the way a singer lifts her chin to give a note a clean path out of the body. Across the city, in a different building where the air smelled like floor polish and worry, a phone on a sergeant's desk rang 3 times before a hand snatched it up, and the name echoed down a corridor that had learned how to carry bad news. A uniformed officer was told to report upstairs. The walk to the command office was not long, but it felt longer because the walls seemed to listen. He pushed the door and tried a smile that had worked many times before. It failed to form. He stood at attention, then remembered he was not in a room that required that posture and straightened into something looser. The commander did not waste words. She gestured to a chair, and when he did not sit, she spoke anyway, crisp as winter. He did not hear the whole sentence. He only heard the last 2, and they knocked the color out of his face. Federal investigation. The courthouse in Brooklyn opened its doors to a morning that felt carefully ironed, as if order itself had been pressed into the walls. Outside, people gathered with posters and quiet conviction, a hum of voices that never rose to a shout, the kind of civic weather a city makes when it has decided to watch. Inside, the corridor smelled faintly of floor polish and coffee lids, footsteps softened by carpet that had heard more stories than any person could hold. Angela and Maya stood together at the security line, the child's hand threaded through 2 of her mother's fingers the way it had been on that evening in the park. A court officer nodded them forward with professional kindness. They found seats near the front, on the aisle, the place where a person can rise without asking others to rise too. Not far behind them, Mrs. Carter sat with a tote that always seemed to produce more napkins than it held, and Mr. Johnson folded his hat carefully into his lap, like respect made visible. Elena Martinez entered on the witness side, in plain clothes and a clear face, and took the sort of breath people take when they intend to tell the truth even if it costs them. The judge's bench looked taller in person than it had on the news. Flags stood at attention without pretending to be anything other than cloth and meaning. The seal above the bench was a circle that asked people to think in circles too: cause and effect, harm and remedy, rights and duties. The clerk called the room to order, and the air changed the way air changes when a congregation stands all at once. The defendant sat with his counsel, suit a shade of gray, meant to borrow seriousness from fabric, jaw set in the stubborn line of people who have practiced not hearing. He kept his eyes in the safe, middle-distance lawyers recommend. He did not glance toward the gallery to learn how small a man looks when he is surrounded by citizens instead of deference. The government spoke first, in sentences built to hold weight. 3 recordings from 3 angles were entered into the record chain of custody described in a tidy way that turns a path through a city into a path through a case. Witness statements were summarized without heed. A medical report noted a bruise that had bloomed and faded on a timeline the body keeps whether or not it is asked to. The room watched the videos on a screen that made the playground larger than the bench where the moment had happened, and yet the size did not distort the truth. From one angle, a uniform leaned too close. From another, a hand made a small, decisive arc. From the third, the geometry of the scene, the phones rising like candles, the children freezing mid-climb, the partner's half-step and halt drew itself like a diagram a teacher might copy onto a board to illustrate how a system works when it does not. The defense tried to pour doubt into the spaces where fear had been. They spoke of misunderstanding, of the need to make quick decisions in complex environments, of the officers' concern for the safety of little ones. They used phrases that have served as scaffolding for smaller structures: context, discretion, reasonable perception. But context is not a solvent for what has been seen. Discretion is not a license. Perception is not a law. When they hinted that the mother's response had been provocative, heads turned in the gallery in a slow, collective no that did not disturb the judge's neutrality, but did remind the room what community feels like when it refuses to pretend it did not witness what it witnessed. Elena Martinez rose and spoke in a voice that did not try to be more than it was. She described the afternoon from the partner's side of the uniform, the training that had prepared her to de-escalate, the choices that had closed that door before she could reach the handle. She did not condemn loudly. She told the truth plainly. She admitted the hesitation that has kept good people up at night when they go home to mirrors. She said, "I tried to say his name softly. He cut me off. I should have done more, and I will live with that." The room did not applaud. It did something quieter and harder. It believed her. Angela took the stand and told the story in the same voice she had used in the conference room. Even, exact, generous with detail, but not with melodrama. She described the hours in the park during those 3 weeks' afternoons, then weekends her notes on the path by the southern entrance, the shaded bench by the dome, the way families were approached with politeness sharpened into a blade. She described the words about comfort and appropriate use, the suggestions to move to a field that was not the playground, the invocation of child protective services used as weather rather than as law. She told the court about holding her child's hand and the way the sound of a palm on the cheek makes a silence that is not empty. She did not reach for the bruise. She named the badge. She said, "I did not match his heat. I matched the law." Oh. The prosecutor asked her to speak to motive without speaking to mind. "Do you believe you were singled out?" he asked. Angela thought for a breath and chose a sentence that could be trusted. "I believe we were treated as if the center was not for us," she said. "I believe other families were treated as if the center belonged to them." In the third row, a grandmother lifted her chin just enough to make a vow. Cross-examination tried to possess the moment the way a person tries to possess light by closing a fist. It did not work. Polite insinuations landed on the polished wood of the witness stand and slid off because the grain was sealed with better work. When counsel suggested that the identification of the officer after the strike had been dramatic, Angela answered with the patience of someone explaining how to dial an emergency number. "It was record keeping," she said. "It was a way to make sure this did not disappear on the way home." The judge asked precise questions in a voice built to find edges and not to cut. "Time," she said. "Distance. Tone." She explored the words reasonable and necessary as if they were stones in the path she intended to cross without slipping. When the evidence phase closed, the judge called a short recess. People stood to stretch, the way courtesy commands, and murmured in the hall about sandwiches and bus schedules and the way truth, when it arrives, makes a particular sound that is not music and not thunder and not applause, but something that draws a person to stand a little straighter. When the room reconvened, the judge delivered her findings and sentence in paragraphs that will live in the transcript long after this day becomes memory. She spoke about authority and its honorable uses, about the way public trust is a fabric woven at ground level, thread by thread, hour by hour. She acknowledged the work most officers do in those hours that never appear on the screen. Then she turned to the hours that do. Justice does not recognize the color of skin. The law does not protect prejudice. The words were not ornament. They were a level held against a wall to show where the building had leaned and where it would be corrected. The sentence did not attempt to measure suffering with arithmetic. It named consequences with care. The officer was stripped of his badge. He was given prison time measured in years, not months. The number spoken as words so that no one in the room would miss the length. He was ordered to participate in a program that would put him in front of the communities he had harmed, not to extract apologies from them, but to deliver them, with eyes up and voice steady. He was ordered to contribute to a fund for community reform under the watch of people who would not forget to watch. The court referred the matter to an oversight body with instructions that sounded less like suggestions than like appointments. Review, retrain, report. In the gallery, shoulders that had been lifted for weeks lowered by degrees, not all at once, because experience had taught them to hedge relief. After, in the marble corridor that amplifies footsteps like small chords, people spoke to one another as if speaking were a way of signing their names. A pastor said, "We will be vigilant and calm," both. A teacher said, "We will explain this to our students as the day when the rules worked." A teenager texted a friend the full name of the statute spelled out in words, because a heart that has learned to fear numbers sometimes trusts syllables more. Reporters stood outside and repeated the judge's line until the air around the courthouse seemed to hold it like a refrain. The sign taped to the diner pie case across the river would fade with light and time, but the hotline number was now written in ink in more than one notebook. Angela took Maya's hand, and they walked out into a sky that had decided to be generous. On the steps, Elena Martinez approached and without preface offered what she had. "I am sorry, and I am grateful." Angela met her eyes and nodded once, the smallest movement that still means "I hurt you." Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Carter hovered at a respectful distance, then closed the space only when invited by a smile. They spoke about nothing grand about the bus route, about a new bench near the pond that had a view of the boats, and those small topics did the large work of returning everyone to a life that would continue to include ordinary afternoons. In the month that followed, meetings were held in school auditoriums that smelled of floor wax and saxophone reeds, and officers sat in folding chairs to listen. Policies were rewritten in sentences that would need to be lived, not just printed. The park felt different in ways that are hard to photograph. Families stayed a little longer, phones came out a little later. A violinist returned to a corner where music wanted to be. The city learned, as it has before, that a full reckoning is not one moment but many. 1 year later, at Central Park, Maya hung from the high bar and called out, "Mama, I am not scared anymore." Angela smiled, her gaze far away, as she received a message inviting her to a new investigation. The echoes of that day did not fade with the closing of the courtroom doors. They lingered in the steady rhythm of children's laughter returning to the playground, in the quiet nods exchanged by neighbors who had chosen to stand as witnesses, and in the calm resolve of a mother who refused to bend before injustice. For those who watched closely, the lesson was not only about one officer or one trial, but about the fragile thread that binds a community together when truth is finally spoken out loud. Justice, when it comes, is not perfect or quick, but it is possible when ordinary people decide to see and remember. Love, forgiveness, and accountability are the tools that allow wounds to heal and homes to be rebuilt stronger than before. Like the small flame that steadies a window on a stormy night, a single act of courage can light the path for all who come after. Take a moment to consider the silent gifts of kindness in your own life, the steady hands that guided you through seasons of doubt. And if this story has touched you, let its warmth move outward. Share it with someone who needs reminding that dignity, though tested, can always rise again.